GT2's been impounded? Chasing 911 C4Ss down the motorway? And scraping the bottom of your car as you go into the pub car park? Oh, this is going to be an epic show. Stick around for this one. It's another Witty 924. Welcome to the show, Nige. It's great to have you here, and we're going to get into the thick and thin of car history with you. For those who obviously listen to the show lots, maybe a quick intro from you, Nige, about your, I guess, views of cars and how it all started for you.
Yeah, okay. So Al, look, firstly, it's a real honour. Thank you so much for inviting me on. And I guess like you, complete and utter petrol head, right? And I got it from my father's love of speed. And I think that's not only with me now, but my 20-year-old son is in a very similar position, actually. So I've always been a petrol head forever. As I sort of grew older and got an opportunity to sort of get out of company cars into my own private cars, ones that I bought myself, rather than being restricted in terms of, you know, maybe a set of choices that you had to make because they were on the company list and you could just go nuts and choose to have your own cars, right? And so certainly the way that companies operated early 90s, mid 90s, when the rules changed, I think it opened up the possibility for people who wanted to own interesting metal rather than what was on the company list. And that's what I did, right? And I've tried over the course of the last 30 odd years to own interesting metal. And as we get into this, I'll talk to you about some of the ones I have owned, right? Because there's some in there that are dear to my heart and I wish I'd never sold. And there are some that I couldn't wait to get rid of. So it's been a real interesting journey for me.
Yeah, it sounds like a roller coaster. No, that's fantastic, nice. So maybe we start at the beginning. That's where all good stories start. And the first car, what was it?
So the first one I actually owned and bought myself was a Mini. It was a 1979 Mini Clubman. I bought it with 88,000 miles on the clock, a dodgy exhaust manifold, and I think the speedo didn't quite work properly as I recall.
Was it a bouncy speedo?
It was absolutely a bouncy speedo, right? You know, it was a best estimate as to how fast you were actually going. Yeah. But my brother at the same time also bought a Mini. He was working as an apprentice actually in a Ford dealership locally to us. So at the weekends, we would more often than not have the garage door open, the heads off those cars, and we'd be working on them. He did a huge amount of mods to his. He put straight through exhausts on. I put twin carburetors on. I think I went from a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch carbs. And I did mods on the aesthetics. So I put 12-inch mini light wheels on it. I put body filler on the wheel arches to sort of bolster them out so that it actually looked like it was the same as the car. And it was British Leyland Brown, for those of you that remember that.
Wow.
And then I painted green and white stripes on it just to sort of make it stand. Because back then it's what you did, right? Everybody of that age, I would have been 19, 20 maybe. That's what you did with cars, right? You modified them. And if you had an interest in them and a tool set and, you know, in my case, a very generous set of parents who let us use the garage at the weekends, we just did stuff, right? And I've always had that love of getting a bonnet open, tinkering. I think it's way harder now. I wouldn't consider it now. But back then it was is what you did, right? And the little car clubs that you were members of, they used to meet in the Camberley multi-story car park on a Sunday night. There was an American car owners club where they had some of the vets and some of the Pontiac Trans Ams. So you know, it was always this little group of people. In fact, two of my neighbours on the same road I lived in, a little bit older than me, but they were into their cars, right? And it was the same, right? There was always a gathering around cars, regardless of what it was. But yeah, my first one, 1979 Mini.
That's awesome. And like the color coding of matching of brown and green. I mean, where do those things happen? Those two colors.
It was green and white. I put green and white, little green and white stripe on the bonnet, and then on the C-pillow, I actually painted the half of it green, half of it white. And even if I say so myself, it actually looked pretty good.
I mean, the bit that stands out as well is where you say, like, back in the day, you tinkered with them. I think. Yes. Even car handbooks, that when you used to buy cars new, handbooks used to have more details. I mean, certainly on my Porsche 924, the handbook has how you do general maintenance.
Yep.
So
The
it
Haynes
almost
manual,
encouraged you, yeah, to look after the car in a sort of hands-on way.
absolutely. You know, the Haynes manual was your Bible,
Yeah.
right? And there were no there are no forums to go chatting on. There was a place somewhere out Weybridge that was a specialist. He used to stock a whole bunch of performance carts for minis, escorts. So, you know, if you wanted to go and know how to do something, you went and saw him.
Yeah.
You'd say, this is the sort of thing I'm trying to do. And he would chat you through the process, and you'd take a bit of paper and you'd write it down, because if you'd never done the steps before, or maybe there was a special tool that you needed to release part of the exhaust manifold on a Mini. I think there was a special tool that you needed, if I remember rightly, to sort of pull the manifold away from the head.
Yeah.
So he'd have things like this. So, you know, the idea that the way you learned was, you know, you're right, look at the manual, but if you can't figure it out, there's no online forums. You'd have to go and physically go to a shop, talk to somebody to see how they've done it, right? It was, but it was brilliant. It was completely instructive. And you always knew, I think, that if you broke down on the side of the road, you had a reasonable chance at knowing what the problem was and how you were going to go and fix it, right? So there was that self-reliance, I think, that taught as well. And it was fun. For those of us who enjoyed doing it, it was fun. It was frustrating. There were times when it did not go according to plan. But at the end of the day, when you put the bonnet down and you'd done whatever you had done, and the thing started first time and it drove kind of as you expected it to, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, right?
No, absolutely, totally agree. And I think one of the big takeaways as well is that with older cars, you do have space to work on them. I mean, you mentioned there that, you know, you could actually get your hands in there. With some of the more modern classics today, there's no space. You can't even, you know, get the covers off necessarily to get to the right parts. So no, I mean, what a first car, and what a color scheme.
Well, I'll tell you, it was priceless, you know. And I was down at Festival of Speed a couple of years ago, and they had sort of 1979 era minis there, and you look at them now and you even compare them to a modern Mini, which my son has, and there's just okay, you can see the DNA.
Yeah.
But other than that, these cars are light years apart, and it's amazing how far they've come in 30 years. But, you know, to think that that's what you used to drive around in, 40 quid to insure.
Yeah, what, 10 quid to fill up the tank?
yeah. And frequently you got change.
Yeah. So that, I suppose, leads nicely on to maybe a next topic is sort of top of mind. What's the worst car that you've owned?
Oh, that's easy. So fortunately, I didn't own it. It was a company car that was given to me as I joined one of the companies I worked for in the mid-90s, and it was a Rover 600. And this thing came with pipe and slippers. It was awful. But the thing I remember most about it was that the turning circle on it was so bad that as I actually came to turn into my driveway the first night I owned it, I got the turning circle completely wrong and hit the wall. I hit my neighbor's house. You know, I scraped because the turning just wouldn't turn. So, you know, I had to go back to work the next day and, you know, explain the situation. But it was awful in every dimension that you can imagine. It was awful. There was nothing I liked about that car at all. And the fact that I hit a brick wall with it on the first night of ownership tells you everything that you really need to know.
Was it so when you were looking at the company car list, was that like the only car you could pick? Is that how you ended up with it? Or?
Well, no, because when we joined the company, it had been a previous guy's car. Before you even got onto the choosing of the list, you had to work with the ones that still had time on their leases.
Yes,
this thing had about 3 or 4 months on its lease, I think. So I had this thing it would have been winter and early spring of 1990, I think it was. And it was just shockingly bad. I had a Citroen C5 for a weekend as a company loaner, and that had this variable suspension setting on the hydrogen pneumatic system, and it had a sports setting. My God, it rattled your fillings. It was it was undrivable. So, you know, I've had a couple of experiences where, you know, don't try and get these things to do things that they're not, right? The Citroen C5 was a barge. It was comfortable. It was, you know, that was its mode of operation. And the switch to actually do it was manual. It was by the handbrake. So you physically moved a lever. So you can imagine you're physically altering the settings on a pump or a valve to make the hydraulic fluid work in a different way, or to operate at different pressures. But it was literally undrivable. In sports mode, it was undrivable. It was funny. It was laughable. Those two stand out, the 600 and the Citroen C5. Never, ever, ever again.
It's interesting because I think Citroens are the car of choice at sort of horse race meets, aren't they? For the cameras, the
Yes,
cameras sit on the roofs, I believe.
that's right. There was a Top Gear episode where they showed the Citroen, the CX-25s that they used to have in the sort of mid-70s, and I might have got that slightly wrong, but you're right. That ride on the car was unreal. I remember my
Yeah,
father having one for a weekend, and he was amazed, and he was into his cars, sort of, not to the extent that we are now, but he commented that this thing was like a magic carpet.
yeah,
It was a very, very different driving experience. The way the dash was set up, the controls, there was a very different logic to the way that the French then approached the design of a car. Very, very idiosyncratic. But if what you wanted was a magic carpet ride, there was nothing that even came close.
yeah.
Nothing that even came close.
Well, they did something right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess that then leads nicely on to maybe what was your sort of favorite stroke best car that you've
Oh,
owned? Tough one.
I knew you were going to ask this, and I was dreading you asking this question. But it's a head and a heart answer for me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
My heart tells me. So I was very fortunate. In the late 90s, early 2000s, I bought a secondhand Delta Integrale, a 16-valve pre-Evo
Wow.
Integrale, and I'd always loved these cars. And to me, in fact, there's a poster on my wall of one of the winning 1987 cars in the Martini racing colors, which to me is as good as it gets, right?
Yeah,
So I bought one of those, and I remember driving it home from the northwest of England, where I bought it from, and just being amazed at this car. I'd read about it, and I had the opportunity to go and buy one because one of the guys at work was selling one. So having bought this and owned this for about a year, I actually then went and bought an Evo 2. So a Delta Integrale Evo 2, NREG, 1995.
yeah,
It was the most incredible driving experience I have ever had, bar none. I've never driven a car that connected you with the road in the way that car did.
yeah.
Now, it was unreliable, it was idiosyncratic, but if you handed me, if you put the keys out of all the cars I've ever owned and said pick one, I would walk back to that yellow Integrale ahead of any of the others.
Yeah.
And there's one which gives it a close run second. I had one of the B7 RS4s, so I had a V8 RS4, which gave the Integrale a close run, I think, in terms of just the sheer enjoyment of a car like that. And with the RS, it was just the power and the inscrutability of it, right? Yeah. I've never felt indestructible in a car, but I felt indestructible in that. I felt like there was no weather, there was nothing that you couldn't do in the RS. But the Integrale is the one that my heart would pick every single time. And it used to be what I called a silly grin car, right? Because not only when you got into it, did you have a silly grin when you got out of it, because it would just been an amazing driving experience. You might have just gone to the shops, but other people loved it. People would come up to you, they'd talk to you about it because it was, one, it was bright yellow, like a sore thumb. And two, it was left-hand drive, because all the Integrales that you ever wanted to own were left-hand drive. You never wanted a right-hand drive conversion. And three, people who knew what they were talking about, or people who knew cars, knew what they had there, right? And again, at some point, probably in the 2000s, I actually exhibited it at a show in Cranley in Surrey. And I got, and it was immaculate, right? I kept this thing in the garage. It was on a trickle charger. It never went out in the rain. Yeah. But on this particular day, it was baking hot. We drove it down to Cranley, and we parked it in the Italian section. So I'm up against Ferraris and a whole collection of other Italian Exotica. There's me with this bright yellow thing, and we got a heap of attention. And in fact, that show was opened by James May, because it was early days of Top Gear. He lived locally, I think, at the time. And he actually opened the show, and he walked around, right? And apparently, I wasn't there when he commented, but apparently people had said he came and he had a long look at that car. We'd gone off to get some lunch, I think, my very young son with me at the time. But yeah, that one, you can hear me, right? It tugs my heartstrings every single time. I sold it in the end to a guy who was a collector. He was going to put it in a collection with an original left-hand drive M3, one of the E36 M3s, I think, the original sort of. So he was going to have that and his Integrale in the garage. And I was thinking, my God, that's a garage. That's a place you'd love to spend time. So for me, it's that Lancia. Closely followed by the RS, but the Lancia wins it.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the color. I mean, it has to be, doesn't it? I mean, you've got to stand out. You say about the May and the Top Gear boys. I mean, I think all of them had sort of a big soft spot for Lanciers anyway, didn't they? And
they did do a special part of the program. They talked about the very innovative nature of that company and some of the firsts that Lancia did.
Yeah.
But equally the car was massively idiosyncratic, right? The wiring loom to the fan, the wiring loom was slightly too short. So when they actually said that the version I bought, the wires at the end where it connected to the actual fan motor were bare, and occasionally they would touch the metal of the chassis, right, as you go up and down or whatever, and so it would short out, so the fan wouldn't work. So you'd blow the fuse, and you'd know the fuse had blown, and the fan would stop working. And so I remember I was driving back down the M1 with my son was in the car. It was a hot summer's day, and the traffic came to a standstill. So I'm sitting there in this car that I know the fan is not going to work. And so the trick you used to do was to turn the heating on full, get all the hot air that you possibly could off the engine, open all the windows. So everybody else is there sitting in there in air-conditioned comfort. And this bright yellow thing with all the windows open and the blowers on full, just to try and keep the engine temperature down.
That is hilarious.
And the temperature gauge hit 120 degrees C, and that thing did not miss a beat. It just ticked over. And I knew at any moment, I was sitting there thinking, something's going to go pop, there's going to be fizz, and that's going to be the end of it. But that little thing just sat there at 120 degrees C. And of course, you start to move and you get the true airflow over the engine, it comes down again. But they had to lengthen when I took it in for a piece of repair work, they had to lengthen that part of that wiring loom to stop it shorting against the body because the fan kept cutting out. So fuel gauge was never a fuel gauge. It was always a best estimate. My wife would say to me, if you're taking that car, I don't know what time I'll be seeing you because I don't know if it's going to come back. Right? She always thought it was a one-way car. It would only go one way. It would never ever come back.
One-way car.
But it was just a blast, absolute blast. And I said that's the one my heart goes out to every time.
Yeah, no, I totally hear it. I think I remember you saying about a story that you actually took your Lancia to Nürburgring. Is that right?
I took not the yellow one. I took the first one to Nürburgring.
First one, okay.
And I was staying with a friend of mine in southern Germany on that particular night, and it's my German is pretty good. I've quite a few German friends, and one of the things you always do is you take a gift, not for the but you always take it for the wife. Yeah. So I was driving through Holland on my way to the Nürburgring, and I realized I hadn't bought a gift, and this is a bad thing, right? So I stopped and I bought this plant. It was like a lily, I think, and it probably stood about 2.5 feet tall, maybe. So I wedged it behind the passenger seat of the car, and it was in full bloom when I bought it. I went around the ring. I did my circuit of the ring. The oil temperature crept up. I thought, I'm not going to do a second run because I've got another 300 miles to drive, and I do not want to be in a position of not being able to make that. But in the process, I knocked all the flowers off this thing. So when we got to Munich that night, I had to hand this collection of sticks effectively to the guy's wife. And I'm really sorry, but if you look at the back of the car, it's lovely. If you just wrapped like a little sticker around the twigs with Nürburgring, maybe she would have totally understood. I think she would have forgiven me. But it was just, again, and the very end of the Nürburgring, I caught up with a couple of UK guys driving a TT. And we just had an absolute little blast around the last few corners and down that final straight. But I pulled into the car park, as I said, because my oil temperature was heading the wrong way, and I decided it was a good idea to stop at that point. But again, it was a Lancia. When you got into the car park and you're out the bonnet, people would come and talk to you because it was just, one, it was relatively unusual, and two, it's a Lancia. So well done, you've survived.
Well done, yeah. Well done for getting here.
Yeah, it was.
So I guess that leads nicely on, and I think you might have already mentioned it as in a car that you certainly found as one of your favourites or best, but what's the fastest car you've owned?
I think the RS wins that again. I think for absolute sheer top speed, that would be up there. But I did, in the year 2000, I bought an M5, one of the first of the V8s, the classic 5-litre V8s that they run these days. So I had that, not from new. It was a very recent second-hand car that had been imported from Germany, actually. Now, I took that to Le Mans in 2001, and and the sort of Porsche connection is one of the guys that we were going with had a 911 Carrera 4S.
Yeah.
Back then in the Le Mans run, there was no auto route down to the last 120 odd miles. You drove it on the A roads, or the RNs, as the French call them. And I was racing this guy in this 4S. So he had one passenger with him. I was 4 up, and we could not be separated. Right, I could not pull away from him, and he could not pull away from me. We were absolutely going for it on these RNs, on the Route Nationales, and it was just the noise of that engine, that V8. It absolutely screamed. And I remember being behind the C4S, thinking, "I've got him, I've got him, I've got him," but I could never, ever, ever quite right. And when we flipped positions, he could never, ever, ever quite keep up with me. But I always felt it was a moral victory. Sorry, Porsche fans, because I was 4 up with luggage, and him and his mate in the front.
Yeah.
And on the way back, another guy in the group had a Mitsubishi Evo 6, and we were on the auto routes this time. And there was a particular stretch that opened up. And the beauty of the French roads is you can just see clearly for miles, right? Yeah. So he put his foot down, I put my foot down, and we went after each other. And again, it was pretty close. But at the end of the day, I was able to overtake him, and I overtook him. And this is, we're talking about speed, right?
Yeah.
My car was nominally limited to 155. We were doing about 165 as I went past him, and I was just changing into 6th gear. And the only reason apparently that I caught him was because he'd literally run out of gears. He was on the red line in top gear in his Evo. He physically couldn't go any faster.
Yeah.
The M5 had it would have kept on going forever, right? There was no doubt in that car that, again, the engineering in it was just indestructible, and it just went. And none of the gauges were wobbly or faulty or moved. It just went. But I remember to this day, flicking from 5th to 6th gear at about 150 odd miles an hour, overtaking him, and then just carrying on, right?
Wow.
Because the M5 would do that. And so nominally, as I said, that car was limited. Mine wasn't. As far as I could tell, mine wasn't. So that's the fastest I've ever driven, is that speed. And it was in an M5. And again, it's just, you don't want to say it's dramaless, because that's wrong. But in a way, it is dramaless. Yes, the white lines and the sense of vision you need to have, you've got to be super, super sharp. No two ways about it. But there was no drama. Yeah. That's the thing with that car. There was just no drama. But what a vehicle. Again, so Integrale RS, the M5 would be a very, very close third. But yeah, that chasing that C4S and being able to not able to get away from him, and him not able to get away from me. I felt was a huge testament to a 4-seat vehicle that it could do that. So, yes, so it's not my fastest car. I think the RS would have been quicker.
Yeah.
But the fastest I've ever driven was in the M5.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, those RS4s, I remember sort of back in the day when they started to arrive, it was obviously an Avant version first.
Yes.
And then I think in the early noughties, the RS4 became a saloon version.
Right.
And it was the one, I think it was the 4.2 V8 that started to actually win a lot of minds and hearts away from the M crowd, the BMW M crowd, because it was sort of a hooligan itself.
Well, the thing that the Integrale taught me, and the first time I'd ever driven 4-wheel drive cars, was that in roundabouts, the sort of the rule is, get into the right gear, slow in, fast out, right? In the RS, you could just do anything. It didn't matter. You could put your foot down in the middle of the roundabout. You could put your foot down before the roundabout. That car just went round, right? Yeah. And I felt the same in the Integrale. The Integrale rolled a little bit more. I remember that. But the principle was the same. Was all of a sudden what you think of as an obstacle or as something you have to be careful how you drive towards, in those 4-wheel drive cars, because they were slightly set up with a rear bias, right? They weren't split. The split wasn't 50-50. It was actually biased towards the rear of the car. So you could do things in it that you wouldn't do in a 2-wheel drive car. Certainly not in a front-wheel drive car.
Yeah.
But I remember that in the RS, and it was just, you just laugh, right? Because it was ludicrous that you could enter a roundabout in almost the wrong gear, completely the wrong angle, just stick your foot down, point the wheel where you wanted the car to go, and it obeyed your every instruction. And in the case of the Integrale, you felt everything whilst you were doing it. So, you know, and again, I haven't driven a four-wheel drive car now for a while, but a good friend of ours, Paul Mackay, has an RS6, and he has the same experience, which is just the angles that you can enter corners into, the things that you can do are sort of ludicrous, and they push you to try a little bit harder because the car is way more capable than you are. You know, you're going to get way scared before it is, but it's that difference. It's just the joy of being able to do that. And as I said, I look back at it now and still laugh because it was just hilarious fun. And you have to be responsible, of course, but at the same time, when the road conditions allow, just go for a blast, right? It's just
insane. So I think funny car stories is a next topic, and maybe I'll start this with you. You probably won't like me for saying it, but obviously when we've known each other for a number of years now, and one of the first times we arranged to meet for lunch, actually, which is a local pub to us here. I remember being in the car park. I think I had my taxi then. I'll say the taxi. It was the W212 Merc E-Class, which I just sort of bought as a sofa on wheels, which it was. Just sort of wafted around like roads. But I remember waiting, and then as you came into the car park, which admittedly had sort of an invisible lip as you came in, you came screaming in another colour. I think you like your bright colours. It was an orange-coloured Mini, I believe. That's right. Cooper, scraping the front as you came in.
Yep. I thought you were going to get me for the number of speeding tickets I've got going down to Le Mans, but
Well, I mean, maybe that's the story. But yeah, I remember that, which was like, oh, hi Nige, how are you? It's like, God, I didn't even see that, but yeah. So funny stories. Like Le Mans obviously is a big thing for you. And,
yes.
A big part of your life and stuff. So speeding tickets, have you set a record then?
Amongst the group of us that go, yes, I am the clear leader by a long way, actually. And there's part of me that has a little bit of pride in it. There's part of me that absolutely isn't proud of that at all. First one's in 2001. In fact, I have a cork wall in my house here where I put a load of memorabilia up. I still have that speeding ticket pinned to my wall. It was handwritten. I think I paid all but 20 euros of it. There was some issue, I seem to remember, and they chased me for probably 5 years. I used to get letters regularly to my house asking for this, but these were all handwritten. They were signed by the notaire of the town, so that the amount of money they would have invested to recover this 20 euros, disrespect to the French, but it was just bonkers. I suppose funny stories. Well, the year I got caught in the RS, there was another RS in the group that was also grey. So mine was a metallic grey one. He had an RS6 actually. So I was in fault. We were doing a little sort of set of sprints down the auto route. I got wrong place doing the sprints. I got caught. And as the police guys pulled me into the service station, again, my French is pretty good. So I was talking to these guys in French. I was saying, well, look, there were 2 grey Audis. Are you sure you've got the right one? And he goes away and he comes back and he got written on his notebook my number plate. I thought, well, I've been done there, right? It's only fair. But there was a Porsche that was caught. It was a 911. I think it might have been a GT2. The guy had only owned it since February, and the Le Mans course is in June. I was caught doing 119 miles an hour, which is a fraction under 200 kilometers an hour, which is kind of the red line for a lot of the French authorities. He was caught doing 132 miles an hour, which was about 230, 240, I think. So the rule is you go in, have your little ticket done for you, and then you go to the ATM, you take out the money and you pay the fines in cash. Right. And the judge had said to me that I was 1 kilometer an hour under being my car taken away. So at 201 kilometers an hour, that's it. Your car gets impounded. Thanks for playing. You're out, right? Porsche guy got his car impounded. And as I was driving out to the ATM, as I came back, and we had a police escort. This is the brilliant thing. We had a police escort. We had motorbikes at front and back as I drove into the nearest town, which is a good 8-10 miles away. Do the thing with your ATM card. And I got police escort back. Pull into the car park. This guy's Porsche is being winched onto the back of a low loader. And that is being towed to another part of town where it's going to be sitting with 20-year-old Renaults and, stuff that's been impounded. God knows what state it would have been in when he got it back. And I said to him, when you go to see the judge, I was fortunate I can speak French. I said to him, just be super humble, super apologetic. Get yourself a French-speaking lawyer. Write the most groveling letter you've ever written. Yeah. Because if that thing sits in that pound for 6 months, you probably won't want it back. Right. And as we left, they were loading his suitcases into the back of a police van and they were going to give him a lift to the railway station. Wow. Now, about 2 days later, we saw him, and this is unbelievable. There's 250,000 people at Mons. We saw him and his mate. They'd gone to the railway station. They'd been dropped off. They'd gone into town to the nearest car rental place. They'd rented a Renault Espace, and they'd then driven down the rest of the way in a Renault Espace because they were determined not to miss Le Mans. So they'd showed up in this Renault, having, but somewhere up country was a GT2, right? It was in a car park in northern France. Didn't catch the guy's name. Never had a conversation with him outside of that. But my Integrale at Le Mans spent more time on the hard shoulder than it did on the road. The first time at Le Mans, it came back on a low loader. I did a tour around France. My wife let me away for a week, so I took the grey Integrale around Europe. The reason I went to the Nürburgring was that was part of the run. Yeah. And I ended up in the Tarn Gorges in the southwest of France, which is just those stunning drives. The night before it had rained, I was out driving around these gorges. I went around a particular bend and there's a rock in the middle of the road. So to the left of you is a solid wall of rock. To the right of you is the river. I decided I was going to aim for this rock and we're just going to go and see what happens. So I hit this thing squared on. There was a bang, sparks, all the stuff you'd expect to. Kept on driving, and all of a sudden the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Because what I'd done was hit the sump plug. So I'd knocked the sump plug clean out of the engine, and 5 litres of oil duly deposited itself in a little sort of lay-by car park area. And I, again, got towed to the local town. It was lunchtime. They decided they weren't going to look at my car till after lunch. I needed to be in Paris that night. I was 600-700 miles away. Came back after lunch. They showed me the damage. Nothing they can do. So I took the bus down to Montpellier and the train into Paris, and my car arrived a week later on the back of a low loader. And it cost 50 quid to fix.
That's crazy.
And a new seal cork gasket, 5 litres of oil. Things started first time.
That's crazy. Getting a car fixed for 50 quid, but 50 euro.
I know.
It doesn't happen, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But that was, again, Lancias for you, right? My yellow one broke down, towed to a garage. Guy in the garage had been a part-time Ferrari mechanic for one of the race teams at Le Mans. And he said to me, I'm going to fix your car. So we went off to the campsite. We were in a taxi. I got a phone call the next morning. The guy said, I fixed your car. I said, I don't believe you. So you hear the little chirp of the alarm go, and it started first time. And what he'd done was he'd basically rebuilt part of the fuel pump seal. So at the back of the engine, as the fuel left it, the seals had leaked. So petrol was not getting into the engine. So he'd fixed it, and it cost 24 euro. And I didn't know what to do. So I just got this guy a 50 euro note and told him I don't want any change, because what you've just, you've been up all night researching, and you've gone to the trouble of fixing my car bit by bit. Right. And it was, and again, an incredible experience, but it was a Lancia, right? And people were drawn to those cars. And again, that is one of those stories that, you arrive in the campsite in a taxi to a round of applause. Well done. You've made it. Right? And then the next day you go pick your car up because some French mechanic has actually taken the care and the time to rebuild part of your fuel pump. Unbelievable. So
that's awesome. I mean, like, staying on the Le Mans theme, I know I've been very fortunate to do a trip with you guys, which was awesome. 2019, it's the last Le Mans start.
I know.
Well, isn't it? So, well, maybe roll on next.
Well,
year.
I mean, 22, we're back, right? Because the rules changes make it interesting. Some of the new manufacturers, they're going to sort of come back to Le Mans. I think that will make it interesting. And, for me personally, because my son will be, 21, then he's already got a car of his own. He's put a Works 210 Mini, which is insane, the noise that thing makes. And so you can see the baton being passed on, because they will drive down as a group in their own cars this year. They'll stay with us on the campsite, but they'll be their own little fleet of vehicles. They won't be riding with us. And for him, he'll have been going since he was 12. So, it's great to see that. It's great to see that sort of tradition, if you will, being passed on, because your son and his mates are now into the petrol scene in the same way that we both are, right?
Yeah, no, and you know, staying on that theme of funny stories, I remember one of the highlights for me as we travelled down in the group was because we were in the back of a 350 Merc estate, so comfortably wafting down the roads in France, as he would say, and the highlight was watching an Alpine 110 go
Oh,
past us
yes.
at some rate of knots, followed by a bright orange, keeping with the colour theme of your cars, Nigel, a bright orange M140 in hot pursuit, and I can only imagine, like.
And that's my current car. And the other thing on that run, driving down the M25 towards the port, I caught up with three 911s who were just playing a little bit of cat and mouse with each other, and they just went for it. And I thought, well, what the hell? Let's see if we can keep up with them. And that little M40 would not be shaken. Right, he was just hanging onto the coattails of these Porsches, and we were at 130, 140 miles an hour. I think it's 5 a.m. on the M25, just in Kent, and I was amazed that these guys were not pulling away from me. I think there were if you can call it a regular 911, there was no turbos in there because I think that would have been game over. But you know, Carrera 2s. Even a Carrera 4, I think the little M140 will keep up with them. I was amazed, genuinely blown away by the performance of that car. And first time I'd ever really seen it perform against, truly classic machinery that you want to think you can hang with. And it turns out you can, right? So I was deeply impressed. And again, the M140, I love that car, insanely love that car. It's just such stupidly fun to drive. And in fact, I run my own business these days, and I said to a number of people, if the business goes well this year, there's an M Performance exhaust coming for Christmas because
I mean,
I think it has to be done.
It's a hell of a package, isn't it? It's sort of it is the classic, wolf in sheep's clothing. That car. It's. And
I think, I don't know about you, but historically I've not hung on to cars. The Integrales I sold, the RS I sold, in part because I always do feel like I want to move on, but I absolutely have regrets. With the M140, I'm not going to sell that car.
Yeah.
Right? If this is the swan song of the petrol era, what a way to go. That BMW straight six is a phenomenal engine. It's in a phenomenal little package. And for me, most of the time, like I think many of your listeners, it's just you and I in the car, right? It's just us.
Yeah.
And so the ability to have something that will do 40 to the gallon if you're gentle with it, but will keep up with 911s if you really want to play, that's actually quite special. So no, this is with me now. I've made the mistakes in the past. I've sold cars I really shouldn't have done. I'm going to hang on to this little M140. It's just such a joy to drive.
Yeah, no, I think there's a sort of there's a view of sort of the old, let's call it cars of today, modern classics, and maybe some of the real classics. This view of holding on to things that really have gone through the stages of whether or not they've been scrapped or lost to sort of accidents. People are looking after. I mean, even the view. I mean, you say the 140. I mean, the M2 stopped being made last year. I know there's a few allocations still going to the US, but sort of an iconic car that so many raved about had a very, very short time of being made, like the Alpha 4C as well. Again, these cars that form the backbone of some of these companies, short build time, short cycles. What now happens, they become iconic, but all of that old sort of petrol driven technology, isn't it? Combustion engine technology that I think people are just going to sort of hold on to because they're never going to be made again, are they?
Yeah, so as we're talking now, it's Goodwood Festival of Speed this weekend. I live on the A31 near Guildford. So as I was out earlier, there's a Ferrari California going down there, being followed by two Austin Hilly 3000s. Right? And so you look at, and again, it was just a joy to see these vehicles on the road. It's a nice sunny day today. It was a joy to see them out, right? And whenever I've been down there, just the sheer amount of metal, first of all, but secondly, there's some real gems tucked away. Right, I think I took the Integrale down 1 year that I seem to recall. Yes, we took the other down, and it was in the overheating year. So I had 3 passengers with me, and windows down, chaps, fans coming on.
We're going to cook you.
Yeah, because the before the Hindhead Tunnel existed, so you used the A3 used to enter the set of traffic lights. It was horrendous. So you're sitting there, the three of us, windows down, hot air blowing. Lovely. Don't worry about the weather. We'll have you all make it. But yeah, it's just that celebration of metal like that is awesome, absolutely awesome. And I'm very lucky that where we live around this area, sort of Petersfield, Guildford, there's a number of very specialist, small, bespoke garages that still look after these classic cars.
Yeah.
The Austin Healey place is less than 5 miles away from me. It's a set of barns on a farm, but he's got a spray shop, a paint shop. He's got a full engine plant in there. So people who still own these classics, one, they can get looked after and looked after properly, and two, over winter they can be stored in places that are dry and free from damp, and that's that helps that helps preserve the life of them, right? So it's always awesome for me to see these things still running around. I had a TR6 for a while, which was
don't say it was in brown.
No, it was orange.
Okay.
There's a theme here.
It had to be a bright color.
And the thing about it, that one was the intoxication of the noise. I never owned a true convertible. So if you've got a sunroof, you sort of kind of think you know what's going on. But when you have a convertible, you can actually feel the heat in the road change.
Yeah.
As you drive, you can actually, and you sense so much more. So not really in the modern era. It was a car that made a fantastic noise. But I remember driving down the A303 racing a Mini Metro Turbo, and I'd have him on the straights and he'd have me on the hills. It was simple. Right? I'd be faster than him on the straights going up the hill, he'd win. But it was again just a little anecdote. But these the fact that metal that is still there, that's still cared for and maintained for, and that people still care genuinely enough about it, it's brilliant, right? It's
no, for sure. It's long may it live. So yes. I guess the sort of final hurrah, Nigel, is your connection with Porsche, if you've ever had them. I know, like we've spoken about some of the cars you hope to own, maybe, and it's been something you've spoken about. Where's your sort of, and I know you've mentioned racing a lot of Porsches in various cars. Yes. So where's your thoughts on Porsche as a brand, and where your connections have joined there?
So for me, the one that I've never owned that I want to own is a 928. I know it's getting a little bit, the time is not on my side in that regard. But for me, that is the iconic long distance tourer. And in 1978, I think it was when it first came out. We were at school, we used to get I think it was either New Scientist. We used to get one of the sort of sciencey magazines. Yeah. And in it, they had a full exploded diagram of the 928. I think it had just been voted car of the year. Yeah. And my pen pal was based in southern Germany, in Stuttgart, and we went over to visit. The school took a trip over there, and I took that magazine with me. And his family couldn't be less interested in cars. But I remember sort of at night in his room, we'd open up this exploded diagram. I would say to you're trying to get him to get the sense and wonder and awe around what it was that Porsche had built here. And again, for me, a little bit of an ideal world is you jump in your car and you drive to the south of France, right? You do these long distance journeys, and I've driven skiing a number of times. So the idea of doing it to me is blissful. Yeah. And the car I'd most want to do it in is a 928, a Series 4. I've looked, and again, if the company goes as well as I hope it to this year and maybe into next, I've got space in the garage now. Yeah. Which I've not always had. So I've looked and I've decided I'm going to settle on getting a left-hand drive one. And I think within the next 12 months, I hope that I'll have a Series 4 928 in the garage, because I think for me the Porsche brand is iconic in so many different ways. Yeah. The 928 to me was always different because it was a Grand Tourer, and I'm not sure they'd been known for Grand Tours before that, and it was a V8, and I'm a huge fan of V8s. Yeah. So you put that with a brand like Porsche, and in that car, that shape. I think the Series 2s these days are getting even more attention than the Series 4s, because that sharp look that they had seems to be in fashion again, right? People really like the early S1 and S2s. I definitely want an S4. If I could find a GTS and a manual, even better. But in the next 6 to 12 months, I will be adding a Porsche to the stable. That's definitely the plan.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I mean, it's quite an iconic story of, that versus the 9, because I think they had an engineering team on the front engines and the engineering team on the rear engine being 911, and we know the history there and who won. But I think all of the front engine cars have sort of found sort of a place now, and even my sort of baby 924, which for many years has been almost like the untalked of child, unloved, sort of it's not a Porsche, but I think they've all sort of found their place now. And
Well, there's an argument that says it saved the company in some ways.
for sure, absolutely.
And people might disagree about them doing SUVs and other bits and pieces, but they saved the company. And if you've got a line of cars that are hugely profitable that allow you to carry on doing the 911s and the derivatives of the 911, take your purist hat off for a second. Porsche is still there. It's it's and there are many brands that are not.
Yeah,
Lancia being one of them. So not in the truest sense anyway. So take your purist hat off for a second. If you as a manufacturer have found a market niche that is massively profitable for you, where the brand is still carried and has meaning and cachet, carry on doing it. Look at I owned a Maserati for a while, right? Look what they've done with the Levant.
Yeah.
Is it the best SUV out there? Probably not. But as Car Magazine says, it'll show you a hell of a good time.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I mean, I think that they've all, everyone knows the SUV market has sort of saved and generated huge amounts of revenue for so many companies.
Yeah.
And, we talk about these iconic brands who sort of suddenly building 4x4s.
Yep.
It's like, the purists get very upset. But you're right. If it allows you to generate revenue so you can keep your purist cars developed and making the next best thing, then why wouldn't you? Yeah, absolutely.
100%. It's the way of the world. Again, the purists will disagree with it, and fair enough. That you can debate that. But for my money, the fact that they still exist. I mean, Porsche, I think, is the most profitable in the VW stable, right? I think it's the most profit generating part of that. But again, when you go down to Le Mans, the thing the two cars that always get people, you're looking for them in your mirrors, right? You're looking for 911s and you're looking for TVRs, funnily enough, because the TVR boys would be absolute lunatics down there. And Noble.
Did they make it there?
Yeah, well, they did. I mean, they'd go in the hundreds and tens might make it, right? But the cars you always looked out for, because with the Porsche crowd and the TVR crowd, right? Yeah. Because one, they're true enthusiasts, and some of the vintage Porsches, the sort of the air-cooled 911s, they'd be a crowd draw. People would just flock to those cars, right? Yeah. And rightly so, because if you look at the engineering, that it was a marvel, right? And nobody's really truly cracked air cooled except people in the VW group, and you get a huge amount of benefit of lightweight and low center of gravity, right? So if you can crack the physics that actually goes with the engineering, and they have, then the fact that you can still go and see these cars that were pioneering 30 or 40 years ago, and the fact that people still care for them, doesn't get better than that. Yeah. And the fact that Le Mans and people like good, they're festivals for these. People are there to celebrate them. They're not there to denigrate them or take the mick, right? They're there because they genuinely have a love for that piece of engineering. And I totally get that. Totally get that.
Yeah. So look, Nigel, it's been absolutely awesome to have you on the show talking. And I think, I would definitely like to invite you back again, maybe more about the futuristic. And, as people have listened to this, they no doubt have heard the way you talk about the engineering aspects and some of the technology, because at your core and your profession is technology.
Yes.
So, I think there could be a great show for us to talk about the future, certainly of cars and all of the new technologies surrounding cars that seemingly are coming faster than maybe we think. And that's something I'd definitely like to get into with you on the next show, on the next episode, a long time. But no, a massive thank you, Nigel, for joining us. Some great stories, great cars, and amazing colours as well.
Oh yeah, it's think bright, man. Got to go orange.
So with that, thanks, Nigel. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you again very soon on the next episode.